Imagine a world teetering on the brink. A world of glittering empires, colossal monuments, and intricate trade networks stretching across the known world. This was the Late Bronze Age Egypt, the Hittites, Mycenaean Greece, powers seemingly eternal. But shadows were gathering on the horizon, carried on the restless waves of the Great Green, the Mediterranean Sea. A storm was coming, unlike any seen before. They came without warning, a tide of destruction crashing against the shores of civilization. They were known to the Egyptians by a chillingly vague name: the Sea Peoples. Who were they? Ghosts from the sea, a mysterious confederation whispered about in panicked reports from Ugarit to Cyprus. Scholars today still debate their exact origins. Were they displaced Achaeans, wandering Sicilians, enigmatic Etruscans, fierce Sardinians, or perhaps others lost entirely to history? The Egyptians themselves listed names like the Pele-Set, the Cheka, the Shekelesh, the Denyen, the Weshesh, names that echo strangely with lands scattered across the Mediterranean, yet form no unified picture. Some texts even hint at Semitic origins, pirates haunting the islands and coasts. The truth remains shrouded, a historical enigma wrapped in the chaos of a collapsing world. Their arrival wasn't mere raiding, it was an onslaught. Cities burned. Kingdoms vanished. The Great Hittite Empire, a rival and peer to Egypt for centuries, crumbled into dust, its capital Hattusa falling silent. The vibrant Mycenaean palace states of Greece turned to ash. Trade routes shattered. Famine stalked the lands once rich with grain. Letters found in the ruins of Ugarit speak of desperate pleas for help, of enemy ships sighted, of lands laid waste. My father, behold, the enemy's ships came, one tablet cries out, they have set fire to my city and have done evil things in my country. Then, silence. Only one great power still stood, ancient and proud, though perhaps resting too heavily on laurels won in ages past. Egypt. The first major tremors reached the Nile Delta during the long reign of Ramesses the Great, Ramesses II. Around 1208 BC, near the end of his rule, Egypt faced a coalition. Libyans from the west joined forces with some of these sea peoples, the Ekwesh, Teresh, Lukka, Shiaden, Shekelesh. They saw in Egypt, perhaps weakened by age, an opportunity. Ramesses II, even in his later years, responded. Near a place called Migdol, likely on the western edge of the delta, a battle raged. Crucially, Ramesses possessed a fleet, perhaps numbering hundreds of vessels. Here, amidst the reeds and waterways, history arguably records its first major naval battle. Egyptian reliefs depict chaotic scenes. Ships locked together, warriors clashing on deck, enemies drowning in the water. Egypt claimed a decisive victory, driving back the invaders, capturing many Shiaden warriors who would, ironically, later serve in the pharaoh's own guard, identifiable by their distinctive horned helmets. But this was only a prologue. The storm had not broken, it had merely receded, gathering strength. The pressure continued. Decades passed. A new pharaoh sat on the throne. Ramesses III. He inherited a world far more dangerous than his namesake had known. The Hittites were gone. Mycenae was a memory. The Sea Peoples were not just raiding now, they were migrating, a vast movement of displaced populations, warriors, women, and children, traveling in ox carts on land and in formidable fleets by sea, seeking new homes in the ruins of the old world. And their eyes turned towards the last great bastion of wealth and stability. Egypt. Ramesses III knew the stakes. This wasn't just another border skirmish. This was for survival. He fortified the coastlines, strengthened border garrisons, and looked critically at his army. He knew Egyptian might alone might not be enough. He expanded the use of mercenaries, Libyans, Nubians, even captured sea peoples like the Shiaden, integrating them into his forces. But perhaps his most intriguing reform, a detail often lost in the grand narrative, concerned military discipline. Traditionally, Egyptian soldiers faced harsh physical punishments, beatings, mutilation. Ramesses III, perhaps understanding the need for unwavering loyalty and morale in the face of annihilation, implemented a radical shift. Physical punishments were largely abolished for soldiers. Instead, the penalty for infractions became loss of honor, specifically, the withholding of pay and rations. A soldier could redeem himself, regain his honor and his livelihood, only through conspicuous bravery in battle. It was a calculated risk, trusting that the desire for redemption and reward, coupled with the existential threat, would forge a more resilient fighting force than fear of the lash ever could. The year was approximately 1177 BC. The storm finally broke upon Egypt's shores. The Sea People's Alliance, a massive confederation possibly led by the Palaeset, who history would later remember as the Philistines, launched a coordinated invasion. They came by land, marching down the Levant coast, their families and possessions lumbering behind. They came by sea, a vast armada sailing towards the mouths of the Nile. Ramesses III met the land invasion first, somewhere in southern Palestine or northern Sinai, at a battle known as Jarhe. Egyptian accounts boast of a slaughter. "I overthrew those who invaded them from their lands," Ramesses proclaimed on his temple walls. "I slew the Denyen in their isles, the Cheka and the Palaeset were made ashes." The reliefs show the pharaoh in his chariot, trampling enemies, his mercenaries fighting fiercely alongside Egyptian regulars. The land threat was halted. But the sea remained. The enemy fleet pressed on, aiming for the vulnerable Nile Delta, the heart of Egypt. Ramesses III anticipated this. He had prepared a trap. Instead of meeting them on the open sea, he allowed the Sea People's ships to enter the mouths of the Nile. Here, in the constricted river channels, their numbers and potential seafaring advantages were nullified. Egyptian ships, perhaps nimbler in the riverine environment, awaited them. More crucially, Ramesses lined the banks with archers. The Battle of the Delta, depicted in stunning detail on the walls of Ramesses III's mortuary temple at Medinet Habu, was a brutal, close-quarters affair. It wasn't ship-to-ship maneuvering in the open sea, but a desperate melee in the river. Egyptian archers rained down arrows from the shore and from their own ships' fighting tops. Egyptian marines, armed with spears and hooks, grappled enemy vessels, boarding them, overwhelming their crews. The reliefs show Sea People's ships capsizing, their feathered or horned helmets bobbing helplessly in the water as Egyptian soldiers speared them from the decks or dragged them ashore as captives. The trap had sprung. The Sea People's fleet was annihilated. A net was prepared for them, Ramesses declared, to ensnare them. "Those who reached my frontier, their seed is not, their heart and their soul are finished forever and ever." Egypt had survived. Ramesses III had repelled the apocalypse that had consumed so much of the known world. He celebrated his victories with immense relief carvings and triumphant inscriptions. Egypt stood, blooded but unbroken, the last giant of the Bronze Age. But the victory came at a cost. Though Ramesses III briefly reasserted control over parts of Palestine, likely settling some captured Palaeset there, Egypt's strength was sapped. The effort of constant warfare, the disruption of trade, internal strife exacerbated later in Ramesses' reign by conspiracies and economic hardship took their toll. Egypt gradually withdrew from its foreign territories, turning inwards. The new kingdom's imperial ambitions faded. The world had irrevocably changed. And the Sea Peoples, defeated, dispersed, their great wave broken on the shores of the Nile. Some vanished back into the mists of history. Others settled, assimilated, becoming the Philistines, the Cheka indoor, perhaps influencing other cultures along the Mediterranean coasts. Their sudden, violent appearance and the mystery of their ultimate fate remain one of history's most compelling puzzles. They were the catalyst, or perhaps a symptom, of a dark age that swept across the ancient world, leaving behind only ruins, legends, and the enduring testimony of the one kingdom that faced the storm and somehow, against all odds, endured. Their echo reminds us that even the mightiest civilizations are fragile, that the sea can bring both fortune and fury, and that history often hides its greatest secrets just beneath the waves.